Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We are Two Generation Analyzation, otherwise known as 2GA. We are a father son combination duo. We mostly talk about sports. We have been talking about sports for the last few weeks just because the NFL season's coming to a close, the playoffs are starting. So it's kind of the highlight right now. But in the future, we will begin talking about exercise, probably guns at some point. So anyway, like I said, we're gonna talk about the NFL this week. More importantly, the start of the playoffs, and they start on Saturday. This is being recorded Friday, so tomorrow. Um, to kind of run through the playoffs real quick, we have the Chiefs and the Packers who won their respective divisions. The Bills and Colts are facing off. Steelers and Browns, Titans and Ravens in the AFC. In the NFC, we have Saints and Bears, Seahawks and Rams, Washington and the Buccaneers. This is a stacked playoff. A couple teams have surprised me that they made it in. I This is not the playoff picture that I was expecting. But anyway, to start off, the Bills and Colts. Right off the bat, I think the Bills take it. They're the number two seed in the AFC. I think they're one of the strongest teams in the NFL entirely. The the Colts, while they have done better than I expected this season, I don't think they are going to stack up against, the Chiefs, the Bills, hell, even the Titans or the Ravens. I think it doesn't really surprise me that they made it to the playoffs per se. It would surprise me if they make it a deep run into the playoffs though. And like I said, with the Bills being in the number two seed and the Colts being the number seven seed, I don't think they're gonna win. Even if they do, I think it's gonna be by a very very small margin, like a field goal game winner. What do you think?
I think the Bills will win. I think the Bills are, as the old saying goes, firing on all cylinders. They are really producing. Josh Allen's doing exceptionally well, and Stephon Diggs is just lighting it up. I mean, they are playing really well. Defense has played very well, and so I think they win. I think the Bills will probably win at 28 to Colts 23. That's my prediction.
Closer than what I would say. I'd say 28 to like 14 or 17.
All right. So is that all you had for the Bills game?
Mhm.
Okay. So we'll cover one of the NFC games now. We're going to go with New Orleans versus Chicago. So New Orleans is at home. One thing I would say during this playoff run, because of COVID, obviously, they're not going to be fans in some stadiums, and if there are fans in other stadiums, they're going to be limited in numbers. So for the New Orleans Chicago game, they're obviously in New Orleans. New Orleans is number two seed, and Chicago's number seven seed. A couple of notes that I went through and looked at, and things that stuck out to me. David Montgomery scored five touchdowns in the playoff game, or excuse me, in the regular season games. So that's a big feat for Chicago. It goes back, I think, back 20 plus years since that actually happened. Were five straight games at a rushing TD by their running back. So I think that's a key that David Montgomery has a good game in this, and then also Trubisky's resurgence obviously had got them into the playoffs. They didn't look like they were going to make it there for a while. His resurgence has actually kicked them in to actually looking like a better and a more legit playoff team. On the New Orleans side of the ball, I think the key here is Breeze spreads the ball out, takes care of the ball, gets the ball to his playmakers. Obviously, a couple of those, if they're back, Kamari and Thomas, and if they're back in the game, that's going to make it much harder for Chicago. Um, Defensive wise, New Orleans has held their opponents to about 21 points per game. Chicago's held their opponents to 23, so not a huge difference there. But flip it over to the other side, and you look at the offense. New Orleans offense has scored 30 points per game, whereas Chicago is about 23 points per game. So I think the keys to the victory are Kamari, Thomas, Breeze, taking care of the ball, spreading the ball around. He's got a lot of key playmakers. Get the ball in their hands and let them do their thing and let them score touchdowns. The other thing is defense. You know, the defense is key for New Orleans. They've really came on this year, and so them playing well, not giving up any huge big plays, keeping it contained. For Chicago, getting pressure on Breeze and then getting some turnovers and not turning the ball over themselves. I think this is New Orleans is favored by 9.5 points. I'm gonna go with New Orleans winning 31 to Chicago 20.
I would agree with that assessment. I think the Bears would put up a good fight against New Orleans if their players are firing on all cylinders. I don't think in any real scenario uh, they win decisively, especially in the playoffs. The Saints, Drew Brees, their entire team, they're going to be coming out with all sorts of different strategies that we haven't seen this season. They're going for the throat pretty much. So I agree with that. 31-20, I would say. Now, on the AFC side, Steelers Browns. Uh I don't know what the what the heck happened with the Browns season. I mean, we talked about it a few weeks ago. As long as I have been alive, and I'm 23, the Browns have been awful. Especially, in the time where I've actually liked football and I followed football. I can't think of a season where they've been like, dang, they look kind of good. I think it was last season or 2 seasons ago when they got like OBJ, Baker Mayfield, and like all these other star players. They were, statistically speaking, based on their players, one of the favorites to win the Super Bowl. And I was like, that's crazy. They've been awful.
On
And
paper.
yeah, on
Mhm.
paper. And then, they freaking tanked. Now they're in the playoffs for the first time in my memory, playing the Steelers who won the division. Um, I don't remember. Did the Browns go 1-2 against the Steelers? Because I know they beat them like the first week of the season, and then they lost to them.
They would only play them twice,
Okay, so they're
so
1-1 against
one
them.
and one, I believe. No, I think they actually lost both games. I'd have to go back and look to make sure. I think they lost both to Pittsburgh.
Um, in any regard, the Browns are 6th seed against the Steelers 3 seed. I think it's going to be a pretty close game. I think the Browns can pull it off if Baker Mayfield does really good. The Cleveland Browns have 5,913 yards, about 370 yards per game total. Let's see. On the list here, the Steelers are a bit lower than the Browns in that regard. So I think if they have a really good game, I think they have a chance to pull it off, even though the Steelers have an incredible defense.
Agree. I think this actually is a game that um, helps Cleveland, that the fans, for the most part aren't there. Um, you know, Pittsburgh is a hard place to play for. I mean, you listen to any of the old NFL players, coaches that have been there, especially in the playoffs. That place is packed. It's loud. The terrible towels are going. I don't. I think that's going to have a much bigger impact on some of the teams, and I think this is one of them.
Mm.
Now, having said all of that, I do think this will be a fairly close game, and
Shit.
I, a lot of times the during the season you don't see the impact of a loss of a player as much, but during the playoffs, a player like OBJ, I know he's been out for a while. I know they've had time to adjust, but this is where they'll miss him, I believe, more than they would in a regular season. You just have if you have more weapons than the defense has the ability to be able to cover, then obviously you can find the open person if you've got enough time, get the ball to them. He's a huge playmaker when he's healthy, and he's not there. But having said all of that, I think Cleveland keeps this a fairly close game, fairly tight. I think it's going to be come down to probably fourth quarter who can pull it out there. And I think Pittsburgh will pull it out, and I think probably around 27-21.
I think that's going to be the game to watch, week one, because the Browns have everything to prove. I think Baker's going to come out swinging, and I hope he does really well. I hope they win, honestly.
That's a good point. I think they have a. I think I do feel like they have a lot to prove, and they're kind of carrying a chip on their shoulder because a lot of teams haven't. A lot of analysts have said they, are they good enough to be there? They really haven't performed,
Yeah.
as expected, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a great point. I think they will come out swinging. It wouldn't surprise me to see them upset the Steelers at home,
Mhm.
but I'm gonna still stick with the 27-21.
Please turn your phone off. All right.
Important phone calls.
Yeah.
Important phone calls.
All right. Go ahead and
I've
take
got
over.
NFL. I've got NFL players calling me, giving me updates. So,
Go ahead and take over the Seahawks and Rams.
um, actually, I'm gonna jump on the Washington and Tampa Bay game next.
Okay.
So Washington fourth ranked with Tampa Bay being the fifth ranked. We know they didn't win. Tampa Bay didn't win a division, so that's why they got in as a wild card. If you look at those two teams, that's a game where the home team is not favored. We got Washington who had a worse record than Tampa Bay did. They didn't even have a 500 record, but they won a division and they got in. Experts, uh, whatever Las Vegas is predicting or giving Tampa Bay, they're favored by 8.5 points on that game. Some notes that I did as I was found that I was researching and thought were very important. I jotted down. Brady is something like 21 and 6 when he's sacked less two times or less, but Brady is only 4-4 in the playoffs when he's sacked three or more times.
Hmm.
So Jack Del Rio, who is known for being a very good defensive coordinator and being able to dial up some pressure, and Washington's defense, especially their defensive line, and some of the linebackers, have the defensive line is playing really good. And so I think it's going to be up to a key here that I guess I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. A key there for this game is going to be Jack Del Rio and Washington D. How can they how creative can that defense get so they can get pressure from different places and kind of keep Brady confused?
Mhm.
So Washington's defense, they're giving up about 20 points per game, whereas Tampa Bay's defense is giving up around 22 points per game. Washington's offense is scoring around 21, whereas Tampa Bay is around 30. So the keys to the victory here, Washington, already mentioned it, get pressure on Brady. Good game management out of Alex Smith. And at the same time, if Gibson is healthy, we know he was, held back a game or two there, and he did come on last week, and he was able to perform pretty well. So as long as he is able to continue to perform well, or even better than he did last time, that's a key to their victory. They got to get Gibson the ball. He's very good, and he plays very well in open space. For Brady, for Tampa Bay, Brady get the ball out before that pressure gets there. He has to be able to do that. He can't take the multiple sacks, I don't think, and have a good game. The Tampa Bay has been playing down in their home, obviously, and haven't really played any cold weather games. So this could potentially be, their first kind of cold weather game, and they're on the road a little bit too. Not that Brady hasn't played in and Gronk hasn't played in that cold weather, but after you've been out of it for a while, we could see a little bit of that, cold weather affecting them.
Mhm.
Having said all of that, with the keys to the victory and everything else, I think Tampa Bay does squeak this out, and I'm going to give it to Tampa Bay 24, Washington 20.
I would agree. I think Tampa Bay is going to win. However, with that being said, I think if Washington's defense, like you mentioned, can put a lot of pressure on Brady, force him to, I wouldn't say make bad decisions because it's Tom Brady we're talking about, but force him to make decisions that could result in a pick. I think if they pressure him a lot and Alex Smith plays to the Alex Smith that we know he can be, I would not be surprised if Washington wins. Even if they're not a 500 team, I don't think they're an awful team. Uh, However, I think the majority of the people you speak to will decisively say that Tampa Bay will probably win that game. But I hope Alex Smith wins it, honestly, from his comeback and everything. I think it'd be an incredible story. Alrighty. Last game for the AFC, Titans and Ravens. Titans are number 4 seed, Ravens are number 5 seed. Now, looking at the rushing yards for the season for both of these teams, the Baltimore Ravens are number 1 with 3,071 yards. The Titans are number 2 with 2,690 yards. I think this is going to come down to Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill versus Lamar Jackson. While I do think that the entirety of the Ravens organization is a good team, I think if Derrick Henry is absolutely running over the opposition like he was doing last postseason, and I think if Ryan Tannehill has been playing as if he's been playing all season, then that's going to be an incredibly hard time for the Ravens defense to contain that, especially when Lamar Jackson kind of, I would say, relies on himself to kind of amp up the rushing game. But since he's such a dual threat quarterback and, they don't have a running back like Derrick Henry, I think it's going to come down to whether those two can really put up the numbers or whether Lamar Jackson is going to be absolutely insane like he was last year. Personally, I think this is going to be an incredibly close game. I would not be surprised if it comes down to a game-winning field goal. I think the Titans take it, personally, because I think they have a bit more weapons and they don't have to rely so much on Lamar. And is Lamar going to perform? I think if Tennessee's having a bad throwing day, they can solidly rely on Derrick Henry to kind of, spread out the sorry, my phone rang. To kind of spread the field open, and vice versa. If Derrick Henry isn't having a good game, but Ryan Tannehill is having a good game, you have an incredible quarterback to rely on. So that's kind of my take on it. I think it'd be 21-24 in favor of Tennessee.
Okay. Well, we didn't compare notes before we did this podcast. I thought you would go probably with the favorite in this, and the favorite is the Ravens. That's who everybody's picking as the favorites. I'm agree with most of what you said there. The couple of keys that I agree with a lot is I do believe Tennessee has more weapons. They have more weapons that they can utilize and not just rely on one factor. Um, I think Derrick Henry will obviously have a little bit harder game because Baltimore does have a good defense. I don't think he'll go off like he did, last year in the playoffs. I don't think that will happen this time. I think they'll do a better job of containing him, but he'll still have a very good game. But they are able to move the ball around and kind of spread it around. So I think Tennessee's got more weapons. They don't have to rely on Lamar, like Baltimore does to pull a lot of the weight.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, I think Tennessee's plan in this game is going to be to contain Lamar, to try to get to contain him, to force him to throw the ball. I do think Lamar is good enough that he can win the game by doing a combination of himself running, running backs getting the ball some, and throwing it. So it's not going to surprise me whatsoever who actually wins this game. If it's a close game, the only thing that would surprise me if one of them blows the other one out. I've got Tennessee winning also 27-24.
Do you know what the over/under is for this game off the top of your
I
head?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't. But let me see. Look it up real quick. Go ahead and talk about something.
Okay. Uh,
Over and under is 54.
okay.
So 54, and I think, what did I say? My prediction would be 51.
Pretty close.
Yeah. All right. So our final game, Seahawks at the, or excuse me, Seahawks versus Rams. Rams obviously be at the Seahawks, and so I think the Seahawks have adjusted. If you watch their games or watch some of their highlights, they've actually adjusted their offensive side a little bit. They're playing a little more of their kind of what you would consider, I guess, a few years ago, Seahawks football, which was running the ball a little bit more and then doing play action off those runs. So obviously, this is a divisional game, and Seahawks and Rams have played each other twice this year. One of the key stats that I saw that really stuck out to me is Wilson is only 1 for 6 in throwing over 30 yards against the Rams this year, the two games they've played. So he's only completed one of those. So I think this will be a little bit more of a kind of a smash mouth. Um, Looking at their stats, Seahawks are well. Let's go look at the ranking. Seahawks are the third seed, and then the Rams are sixth seed. The Seahawks are favored by 3.5. I believe that 3.5 is if Goff plays and Goff can play fairly well. Is if he plays fairly well, I think the Seahawks are still 3.5 favored. If Golf can't play or Golf plays and is limited and really just doesn't look like himself. He's better than their backup quarterback, but still, has a pretty pretty shaky game. I can see the Seahawks, beating them pretty handily. The backup quarterback is for Golf is Wolford. I don't think he has ever. I think this is only would only be his second game, I believe. So this would be huge, even without the Seahawks 12th man, their fans. It'd be a big game for him. So I'm sure they want to do everything they can to go Golf in the game. Looking at their stats, quickly, defense. Seattle's defense is giving up 23 points per game, whereas the Rams is giving up 18.5. Offensively, Seahawks are scoring 28.7 points a game average, and Rams 23. So again, that's with Golf playing, for the most of the regular season. We're in the playoffs now. Golf banged up. I see Seattle winning this game, even with Golf playing. I see Seattle winning this game 21-17. If Golf doesn't play, this is much more of a, this could be easily a 28-13 game.
Yeah, the beginning of the season, I remember Russell was absolutely annihilating all the teams. Uh, it was he was I think he had like one interception like halfway through the season or something like that, and it wasn't even his fault. But then towards the end of the season, in my opinion, they started to cool down a little bit, especially the wide receivers. With that being said, I don't think in any reality the Seahawks lose to the Rams just because they're so stacked. Uh, Honestly, I think if the Seahawks play and they're firing on all cylinders, and DK and Russell are incredible like they have been and like they were the first part of the season, I pick them as to be in the Super Bowl. It's just my opinion, though. Do you have any closing statements now that we've gone through
I
it?
would say, one thing. If you look at our picks, we picked the home team pretty much in every game, with the exception of the Tampa Bay game. Um, and we picked the favorite to win in all the games, with the exception of the Titans. So yeah, we'll see how that plays out. I do believe that the lack of fans in the stadiums for the home team is going to be big this year. Even if there's a few thousand, it's still nothing compared to when a stadium is packed at 70, 80,000 fans. The noise, a little bit of a maybe a intimidation factor from the crowd, with all that screaming and just being able to communicate with the players, changing the plays, audible and audibleizing, and then also giving the signals to the offensive line, the direction to the offensive line of who they're picking up, who the mic is on the linebackers, who they think is actually going to come in and possibly blitz, things like that. So I think that'll play a much bigger role, and I think the visiting teams will have a much more competitive in the wild card round.
I agree. Uh, that is it for our segment today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for watching. Next week we'll probably wrap up week one and then talk about week two, and make some more predictions and probably some predictions on who we think is gonna win it all. Given that half the teams are gonna be gone. So with that being said, thank you very much for watching. Tune in next week, and we'll see you.
See ya.